Is the Onyx CTY2 worth the reboot? 47, 48. That's coming right up. Hey everyone, my name is Rick Cordero. Welcome to RunPlayBack, where we help you with video and tech tips to lead a more efficient and affordable lifestyle. Let's be creative and save money at the same time. Today we are checking out the highly anticipated Onyx CTY2 electric motorbike. While the Onyx RCR continues to be one of the most popular bikes out there, the CTY2 has been rebooted from the original CTY launch over 4 years ago, which only sold a few units before being put on indefinite hiatus due to the popularity of the RCR. Now it's back with some key improvements, and despite having lower specs than the flagship RCR, the CTY2 is affordable and features a step-through design that makes it accessible to a lot more riders. In this video, we'll discuss the features and let you know whether the Onyx CTY2 is worth the hype as its big brother, the RCR. And full disclosure, the Onyx CTY2 e-bike in this video was purchased with our own money. We haven't received any cash or other forms of compensation in exchange for this video, and no one has had any pre-approval or conditions on the contents of this video before it was released. So let's get to it. Purchasing a high-powered electric bike for the first time can be a little unnerving. After all, dropping 4 to 6K on a depreciating asset like an e-bike is not a simple decision. The most popular bikes in this space, like the Onyx RCR or the Sur-On, have built strong communities centered around performance modding and group rides. But what if there was a bike that fits slightly below that space? Something that's more accessible due to price, weight, and size. Now, one could argue that companies like Super 73, Aerial Rider, and Juiced dominate that market with their extensive product lineup. But Onyx, for better or worse, has stuck to their guns and focused on the production, quality control, and support of their flagship RCR. So why launch the CTY2 now? After surviving last year's internal company drama and moving to a more efficient facility in El Segundo, Onyx was prepared and ready to do something new. And while the RCR is definitely an awesome looking bike, it's not really for everyone. It's heavy and not very intuitive to ride without some e-bike or moto experience. The CTY2, on the other hand, looks friendlier, if that makes any sense. And while it does have that vintage step-through moped look, it still retains the signature Onyx aesthetic. If that sounds appealing, then the Onyx CTY2 is one of the most thrilling e-bikes in its class. But first, let's talk about cost. So from full pre-order payment to delivery, it took about 1 month and 12 days. Compared to the delivery of our RCR, which took 117 days or nearly 4 months, it felt amazingly quick. And if Onyx has been building up inventory for the CTY2's July ship date, we'll probably see even faster shipping times. And while the full retail price is targeted to be around $3,900, it's still more expensive than offerings from Super 73, Aerial Rider, or Juiced.
Where did you find that? Some kid back in town traded the van for it straight up.
And the reality is that most people buying an Onyx these days have already had a taste of e-bikes in that class and are looking for something more powerful without having to get a motorcycle license. And Onyx can get away with it because it has pedals. Pedals that are mainly used for decoration, but more on that later. And rather than shy away from that giant legal gray area, Onyx fully embraces it, which makes them stand out as a very specific lifestyle brand, which features a lot of black clothing and synthwave. But in our opinion, the CTY2 has a much more stealth e-bike appearance than the RCR. And while pedaling in Onyx is about as useful as investing in Terra Luna, the CTY2 pedals actually complement the step-through design as your eyes follow the lines of the battery cover down to the crank arm. Also, having an open frame with the absence of aluminum side panels makes riding in windy conditions more practical since you don't have to deal with the sail effect. So before we get to the specs, let's see the delivery. Of course, it's raining again, just like when we got our RCR. This time they deliver in a FedEx freight truck and not haul bikes, so this is gonna be interesting. How's it going?
Good, how you doing?
Pretty good. That's fine.
Sign here and initial liftgate service.
Got it.
All right, have a good day.
Thank you. Do we keep this pallet too?
Yeah.
Okay. Looks like we're missing a stand here. Probably got lost in shipment. Hopefully the bike is okay. Okay, so since it's missing this piece of plywood over here, I'm gonna try to open it up flat, see what happens. Okay, definitely a bike in there. What's the damage? Okay, so it looks like the fork kind of came loose from the wood over here. Not a big deal. There's some assembly with the front wheel. Cut this. Definitely the first thing that's noticeable with this model is that you have white rims. Some foam. That's what I used to put it in my studio when I made beats.
Christmas story when he's opening the box.
Yeah, it came in a big wood box.
Would you look at that?
Well, that was just a lamp. This is like a bike. Here are the handlebars. Is it worth waiting for haul bikes to deliver a fully assembled bike? Your mileage will vary on that, but to get it earlier and just to put the wheel on, put the handlebars on, I think it's worth it. But freight shipping is different, no matter who the carrier is, and you just have to be aware of that. I can imagine there's some people who might be a little intimidated about receiving something like this and maybe not having a driveway or space to actually assemble it and have like a pallet laying out, especially if you live in an apartment or something. So some things to think about when you order one of these things. So Onyx does provide a certificate of origin just in case you want to register it as a moped. Okay, next we'll get some tools. We'll put the front wheel on.
One debt to society later.
Now we're gonna stand the bike up so I can attach the handlebars. Good thing for the step through. The handlebar keeps wanting to get sucked into the wheel. It's pretty low. It's almost the same size as the Shorty, I think.
Done that yourself.
All right, we finally assembled the Onyx CTY2 and we're just going to compare it to our Onyx RCR. So very similar, but different in a few ways. So the CTY2 definitely feels or looks like it's smaller, even though it is supposedly the same height as the Onyx RCR Shorty, 11.5 inches from top to bottom, 11.5. Definitely feels like more of a bike because of all this open space over here. Since the seat is really prominent now, this would probably be the first thing that I would customize. So the controller is mounted over here on the bottom. The controller is a Kelly controller, 24 to 60 volts, 240 amps. Also, the controller is more exposed. You have these vents here for cooling. It's probably waterproofed or weatherproofed. I'm sure the cabling is all waterproof. So the key fob is the same as the RCR, as well as the battery cover keys. Same design. So let's see what's inside. Okay. The battery is not covered by a metal enclosure. They upgraded the battery straps. So instead of that mini Cobra buckle, they went with the Velcro straps, which was a mod that John Angel actually found when he first got his Onyx. I think if we measure this, I think we could, you know, send it over to Shy Battery Systems and see if they could make an aftermarket battery for this thing. I'm pretty sure they can. Another cool thing that I noticed on the CTY2 is that the charging port is located right here on the bottom. So that's really convenient. Compared to the RCR, the charging port sort of dangles outside of the frame here. As far as the fork goes, I think it's pretty much the same shortened fork. On the RCR, you'll see that we have these bump stops over here because when you turn, the fork slams into the wood. So that's been an issue for all of the RCRs, and that's kind of how you get damage over here. But they fixed it on the CTY2. So you'll see you have a little bit more of a turning radius, and the fork actually bumps up against the frame. I would add bump stops anyway, just so the metal doesn't kind of smash into it and dent it, but it doesn't hit the wood anymore, it clears it. Another cool thing about the CTY2 is that indicators come standard. Also back here, we have rear indicators, really compact, really stealthy. It doesn't come with a front fender, so we'll probably have to get another one of these David Shaw style magnetic fenders. And the other big cosmetic difference are the white rims. The whole rim is white. It's not a white wall on the tire. As I look at them side by side, you know, the step through definitely feels more like a vintage moped. This looks more like a kind of light electric motorcycle on first glance. If you rode it on the bike pass, it wouldn't be as noticeable as the RCR. Onyx did mention that the weight is about 140 pounds, whereas the RCR is 150 pounds. So there's only a 10-pound weight difference. If this came in at like 130 pounds, it would be kind of cool, a little bit more manageable. Another thing with the step through is that it makes it accessible for a lot more riders who are vertically challenged like myself. Even though I can get up in the seat, I'm still sort of like not flat foot totally. So if I come to a stop, you know, I can kind of get off like that. The center of gravity is lower because the battery is facing down over here. I'm glad that they spent the time to think about the design, think about some of the things that could have been improved on the RCR and ported it over to a model that's cheaper and more accessible to more riders. Now, before we go over our first ride, let's go over the specs. The Onyx CTY2 is a 4,000 peak watt e-bike with a top speed of about 45 miles per hour. It's powered by a 60 volt, 23 amp hour battery that features a quick charging connector on the bottom of the frame. Like its big brother, it has front and rear suspension, hydraulic brakes, a half twist throttle, 17-inch wheels, an integrated halo headlight, tail light, and a large LED display. And like our shorty RCR, the CTY2 comes with a lowered fork and rear suspension, which improves the center of gravity for better control. So before we ride, we have to enable sport mode. You don't actually have to do this on the RCR, this is just for the CTY2. So on top of the battery is this kind of green wire here. It's encased in plastic, okay. So this, I think, is what enables sport mode. So I believe you just have to connect it. So you want to get a scissor and just cut the heat shrink just a little bit into that hole, and it locks it in. So we could put this back into this little sleeve, and then we'll test the bike. Eco, normal, and sport. There you go. So if you're wondering why sport doesn't work, you have to connect that wire underneath here. So another thing you want to know is how to charge the battery from the bottom. So this is the port for the CTY2 battery. It's a little bit different than the XLR connection from the RCR. The charger is green when you plug it in. That means it's not charging. When it's red, it's charging. So when you first plug it in, you'll notice that it's not charging, right? Why isn't the battery charging? What's wrong with the charger? Well, what you're gonna have to do is basically twist the connector to the left, and watch what happens when you twist it to the left. So once you twist it to the left, the connector engages with the port, and now you are charging. So those are just two things to keep in mind to enable sport mode and to charge the battery. I didn't really know. There isn't a whole lot of documentation on the website. So hopefully Onyx provides that information when they start shipping these things in July. So now that we've covered the specs, let's take it out for a ride. All right, we're gonna do our first ride with the Onyx CTY2. We'll start on eco mode. Look at this step through. Look at that. That's step through. Couldn't do that on the RCR.
Dang. Lucky.
All right, let's try eco mode. Here we go. Okay. Nice and smooth. I like that. My turning radius is pretty good. It feels like much further out than the RCR. It doesn't quite have the punch as the 72 volt, but you know, 60 volts is actually not bad. Now let's do normal mode. Here's normal mode. Okay, so acceleration is slower than the RCR. Throttle is very smooth. Now let's try sport mode. Okay, here we go. This is sport mode. All right. Yeah, that's what I'm used to. Whoa. Okay. Wow. Yeah. That goes pretty fast on sport mode. Okay. Wow, first impressions. So eco mode is slower than the RCR, but that's because it's a 60 volt battery. So you're not gonna get the same punch as a 72 volt. You're not gonna get the same sort of speed ramp as a 72 volt, but it's okay for beginners or, you know, riding in the city. Normal mode is a little bit better. It does still feel like the throttle is limited a little bit. The ramping up is very smooth. You know what I mean? It's not an abrupt throttle like that. It ramps up, takes a few seconds to get to top speed. Sport mode feels very similar to sport mode on the RCR. It maybe doesn't have the same kind of punch because it's not 72 volts, but it does get up to speed really quick, actually. I wasn't reading the speedometer, but I think it did go up to 50 or so. This might not be accurate. It might be off by 1 to 3 miles per hour. So we'll have to test it with the GPS. Pedaling it is, you know, it's not fun, but it's doable. I think this action of pedaling feels a little bit more natural because you have all this space right here. So yeah, that was that felt really, really cool. Not as powerful as the RCR, but that's kind of what we wanted. We wanted something that was just a little bit more chill, somewhere between our Super 73 Z1 and our 72 volt Sur-Ron. And I think this really fits into that space. We'll do some more testing and see how it goes. In terms of looks, the frame is a low-swept steel tubular step-through design with Onyx's signature wood grain battery cover, minus the aluminum side panels. We do like how the V-shaped line of the frame is even more prominent because of the step-through. It also gives it a minimal, sleek aesthetic. The swing arm is made from heavy-duty steel and creates a level ride on most terrain. Above it, the padded seat is almost identical to the RCR, which is fine and functional. But now that the seat is so prominent, getting one customized would make a lot of sense to add more personality. On first glance, the CTY2 looks a lot like a bike, rather than a small motorcycle like the RCR. And while it wouldn't look completely out of place on a bike path, it'll definitely draw lots of attention. Range is marketed by Onyx as 60+ miles on economy mode, and much less on normal and sport modes. So now let's take the Onyx CTY2 out on the streets. All right, so we're gonna test out the performance. There are 3 riding modes. We have Eco, Normal, and Sport. Compared to the RCR, the CTY2 is definitely a little bit more tame. You know, Eco mode right now is limiting me to just under 20 miles per hour. Right now I'm at 16 miles per hour going uphill. It's probably something I, you know, use when I'm going on bike paths, something like that. Let's bump it up to normal mode. So normal mode is now giving me just a little bit more speed. So the torque is pretty much the same. Kind of feels like a slow kind of velocity. Torque is the rotational force by the motor that's transferred to the wheel. And so the controller is not programmed to be very strong in the torque department. That's where the RCR kind of like shines a little bit. You get that, you know, sudden burst of torque on the Kelly controller, which you can tweak to like sicko mode. I believe it definitely opens up, and you can feel the 4,000 peak watts when you open it up to sport. And we'll get to that in a second. Right now we're just keeping it on normal. Our battery voltage is about 68.7 volts. So we're gonna open it up to sport. And here we go. So sport mode definitely has a very familiar feel as sport mode on the RCR. And I'm getting up to speed pretty quickly. According to the dashboard, hit about 42 miles per hour. The car coming up here, not sure if they see me. Okay, yeah, sport mode. Sport mode definitely feels pretty strong. So I know the phase amps are limited on this bike, so I'm not sure if you can squeeze out more speed if you tweak that setting. And you probably can through Bluetooth if you use the Bluetooth app to control the Kelly controller. But right now this is a pretty good speed. This is like, you know, 35 to 40 mile per hour road. Perfect. So this road is going to be a little bit rocky, so this will be a good test of the comfort. So the CTY2 is lower for a better center of gravity. And I'm not sure if you can notice it, but my knees are a little bit closer together, which is something you couldn't really do on the RCR. You know, because of the side panels located right in the center of the frame, it was really hard, you know, for your knees to get really close or to really hug the bike in a comfortable way to control it. Here, my knees can actually touch, right? And maybe because my legs are shorter, but it gives me just a little bit more control. Okay, now we're hitting some really rough terrain here, and you could feel it. You could feel the weight of the bike. I'm now standing up just so I don't feel all those jarring movements. The shocks, you know, absorb a little bit of the vibrations, but not a whole lot. Not a whole lot. All right, let's pull over here and let's do our speed test. All right, so let's get to an open path before we run the speed test. All right, here we go. 32 miles per hour, 35, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 45 miles per hour, 47, 47, 48, 47, 48. All right, hit a top speed of 48 miles per hour. That was pretty accurate. Slowing down to 33. All right, 48 miles per hour top speed. So it's actually about 3 miles per hour more than what it is advertised as, which is, I believe, 45 miles per hour. Not bad. Not bad at all. I mean, yes, I think if you tweak the settings on the controller, you could probably get it past 50, but honestly, that felt good enough. I mean, 48, 50 miles per hour on this bike, anything more, I don't know. Not really comfortable doing it. Maybe on the RCR, but maybe not on the CTY2. I felt good though. I definitely feel, you know, on smooth roads like this, super nice, very maneuverable. You know, again, the lower center of gravity is really keeping me locked into the street, locked into the road. I don't feel all that weight in the center like the RCR, so I definitely feel like I'm more comfortable riding this. Overall, the RCR, yes, is more powerful than the CTY2. Eco and normal modes don't really do much, but the CTY2 it's more casual. It's meant for more casual rides. So I just needed something that wasn't super powerful, but still felt like a bike, even though you can't really pedal this. With that said, as you saw in the assembly, the CTY2, you know, requires a little bit more experience and situational awareness compared to regular bikes or regular e-bikes because of the weight and the power. Eco and normal, most people can handle. Sport mode is pretty powerful. There's a big gap between normal mode and sport mode. Normal mode 20 miles per hour, sport mode 48 miles per hour. So that's 28 miles per hour difference between normal and sport. Could normal have been bumped up to, say, 35 miles per hour? Possibly, but then you'd sort of get into that legal gray area of, is this an e-bike or is this a light electric motorcycle? So, you know, good on Onyx for addressing some of those issues, some of those legalities. It's gonna be different for every state, but good on them for doing that. And also sport mode only being enabled when you connect the green wires. So for the casual rider, for someone who's not really experienced, these are protections that are put in place so that they don't hit those speeds. So another thing to consider is that the bike draws a lot of attention. about as much attention as the RCR, maybe even more so because of the step through. Like for example, I brought it to an event last night at my daughter's school, and while I didn't ride it through the event, I did walk it through, and you know, got a lot of compliments, got a lot of people stopping me, asking me, well, what is that? Is that a motorcycle? Is that a bike? You know, that kind of thing. So you will still draw a lot of attention. And finally, I think that Onyx is really targeting a more accessible audience. People who are buying the Onyx RCR were folks who either had experience with motorcycles or wanted to go really fast. And it left out a lot of people, you know, because of the size of the bike, because of the weight of the bike. And I think this bike, the CTY2, is not a compromise to a lot of the aesthetics and a lot of the sort of lifestyle branding that Onyx has created. It still feels very much like an Onyx. Honestly, I definitely see us riding the CTY2 maybe a little bit more than the RCR, just because sometimes the RCR just feels a little bit like overkill for some of the more casual rides that we do. When we have open roads, when we're in traffic that's moving at, you know, 40, 50 miles per hour, RCR is perfect for that. For everything else, the CTY2 kind of fits that space.
So here's what we like about the Onyx CTY2. It's a fun bike to ride, and in some ways, even more than the RCR, because of its more casual specs. It's also a bike that's ripe for modding, from customizing the seat to converting to 72 volts. And like the RCR, riding the CTY2 is unlike any other e-bike out there. It's that combination of classic and modern parts that Onyx has chosen, which takes the nostalgia of vintage mopeds and transforms them into the future of e-bikes. Also, I'm not a big guy. Most Onyx RCR riders are nearly twice my size and weight, and most of them are dudes. Since the CTY2 is smaller and easier to mount and ride because of the step-through, this makes it accessible to a lot more riders. Step-through bikes are more practical and functional for riders who may have a disability or limited motion, which is literally the difference between being able to ride and not being able to ride a bike. It gives everyone a chance to experience the thrill of riding a powerful e-bike, especially with friends. And that's definitely part of creating an all-inclusive e-bike community, which is what we support. But what about last year's internal drama? Is Onyx now a reputable company? Like we said in the review for the RCR, every startup company can succeed or fail very quickly. But since that time in March of last year, Onyx has taken some big steps in gaining back their customer loyalty, which in our definition means being honest in a high-powered e-bike culture that's filled with a lot of smoke and mirrors and flashiness. Consistency and trust will be the key factors in determining the future of Onyx motorbikes. With that said, if you're looking for an out-of-the-box e-bike without having any interest in DIY, this may not be the bike for you. You'll still need some basic wrenching skills to keep up with the maintenance, or at least find someone that you could pay to do it for you. But with a very strong modding community and improved customer service from Onyx, the CTY2 can easily be diagnosed and self-serviced if you do the research. If you don't want to do the research and like having others do all the work for you, including typing words in Google search, you may be frustrated. But if you're looking for an electric moped that really looks and performs like one, the CTY2 fits the bill. Other e-bikes in this class want to be seen more as a traditional e-bike, while the CTY2 was created to appeal to the moped enthusiasts. And if you know anything about moped culture, it's really not about going as fast as possible. It's about being with friends, having fun, and riding together. If that sounds like you, and you want something with lots of style, power, and modding potential, the Onyx CTY2 is a solid recommend. In our next video, we'll go over some of the mods we discover and share links to all the parts and resources we use. If you want to dive into more video and tech tips, click the links on the side, and remember to like and subscribe so we can help you find tech deals that fit your lifestyle. We'll see you guys in the next video.